Hello, everybody, and welcome to the SoxProspects.com podcast, the web's number one source for information on the Boston Red Sox from top to bottom, from Fort Myers to Worcester, across the Pike to Fenway, and all stops in between. Thank you all for listening. I'm Chris Hatfield. That's Ian Kundle. You know who we are if you listen to the show, and we have a very special episode for you today. We are joined by Brian Abraham, Player Development Director for the Boston Red Sox, making his return to the program. Ian, we had another absolutely terrific conversation with Brian, as it always is, either on the podcast or at the field. Great guy with some really interesting stuff. What really stood out for you from our conversation? That's of course already recorded through the magic of of the internet.
So you're looking for a teaser here.
Yeah.
No, I thought he had some really interesting things to say about the processes, especially when it comes to like things like bat speed, pitchers gaining velocity, things like that. And I also think he had some really interesting nuggets about specific players. They kind of brought up in the context of broader questions, sure. But I think if you listen closely, you can hear some really interesting kind of thoughts about he has and what they thought about the season that certain players had this year.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to have him on for like 4 hours and just literally go down our top 60 and beyond and just ask him about everyone, right? Because as he said on the show, it's, everybody has a different specific individualized development plan. I think hearing about that was really interesting to me. Yeah. And kind of something I didn't plan on hearing about, right? About how they plan out what guys are going to do in a given time frame. I don't think I quite appreciated that that's the level of detail. I mean, I guess it makes logical sense. And it's not that I didn't think they did something like that, but hearing about it, I found to be very, very interesting, and what goes into it for each player and how it is different for different guys at different parts of the year.
Well, it's something too that I even noticed when I go to games, because 5 years ago, pre-COVID, let's say, they'd take infield on the field and they'd hit on the field. Everyone would do that every day. And now the affiliates, you see that maybe once or twice a week. A lot of the work is done behind the scenes because it's all individualized. And yes, spring training is the same thing. Yeah. Where, they can get a lot more when they're hitting off the track machines or, the special pitching machines with tracking data that they have in the back and, doing all the individual work back there.
Yeah. I mean, there was that Baseball America article recently about their training for their hitters and how
I think
it's
Jeff
all done in cages now. Was it Jeff? Yeah, that makes sense. What they're doing, it's all in the cages and it's competitions in the cages. And it's like, before you say, well, that games aren't played in the cage. It's like, well, games aren't played in batting practice situations either.
No.
Right. Like hitting soft toss.
As we talked about with Brian, Brian talked about, though, they are games. Like that stuff really matters at the minor league level.
Yeah, for sure. But it was an absolutely terrific conversation. We hope that you all enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed doing it. But of course, if you could help us out, tell a friend, tell your local Little League Home Run Derby winning coach, spread the word about the show. You can also help rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, or that weird Android podcast app that Hatfield uses. And of course, you can support us on patreon.com. He's shaking his head.
Imagine how much better your photos would be if they were on.
My photos are terrific.
Not as good as mine of the
That's because you had better photo. You had better photo because you had better northern lights because you're more north. I have more light pollution than you do in the middle of nowhere.
I also have an iPhone, and you don't. So
don't make me throw the challenge flag. And of course, you can support us on patreon.com/SoxProspects and get some sweet perks for your support of the show. In this episode, we want to thank the following $5 level supporters. That's Michael Murphy, Pavel, Jordan Shabbat, Mike Kawano, Chris Bollier, Curtis Waltman, Michael Stewart, Caleb Farron, Jason Stoneburner, and Grayson Sinner. And just a note for everyone who is, or I guess for those who are supporting us on Patreon, you're good. For those who are considering supporting us on patreon.com/SoxProspects, just a heads up, starting on November 1st, if you purchase a Patreon membership through Patreon's iOS app, so on iPhone, iPad, etc., Apple is going to start charging a 30% transaction fee. This fee is not going to apply to anyone who joins our Patreon October 31st or earlier. And it will not apply if you're using the website or the Android app, as much as you want to trash my Android, Ian. Again, if you're considering joining and you really want to use the iOS app, would really suggest you do it before November 1st, because I don't want to see you pay 30% that you don't have to pay. Or if you decide to do so after that date, I would highly recommend using a platform or an app other than the iOS app to join our Patreon. And we would, again, really appreciate you doing so. But just wanted to give you all that heads up because we want to talk about what you want to hear about, but we also don't want you to pay more than you need for this used car or whatever it is. But thank you for your support of the show. We don't want to see you pay more than you need to do that. So thank you to everyone on patreon.com/Sox Prospects. We're not going to have an outro after the interview with Brian, so we will throw to the outro here and then transition into the interview with Brian. So thank you to our producer Daniel Fox. You can follow us on social media. The site is at Sox Prospects. You can follow Ian at Ian Cundall, IANCUNDALL. You can follow me at SP Chris Hadfield, including I admittedly, Ian, I tried Threads for like 5 days. As much as people want to trash Twitter, like couldn't do it.
Is Threads the Instagram one?
Threads is the Instagram one.
Yeah.
And it is just hot trash. Like half the people I was following on Threads were complaining about how bad Threads was. So yeah, I mean we're on there. If there's a place that, you know, I think we're technically on Mastodon and Blue Sky if you want to try and find us there, but I'm not posting there for FYI. Thank you to the Ludlow Thieves for our intro and outro music. You can find their stuff wherever it is that you listen to music. And of course, I mentioned the Patreon. So here is our interview with Brian. We're going to get some more interviews, hopefully this off season. Good time to get in touch with folks, ask them about things. I think this is a really interesting interview, whether you are someone who is new to the prospect game, someone who has been following for a long time. I think there's something in here for everyone. Ian, anything else before we throw it to the interview with Brian?
Nope. Just thank you for listening as always.
Yeah.
And
thanks
enjoy.
to you all. And thanks to Brian, of course, as well. So,
yes.
Yeah, enjoy. And we'll be back with more of the web's best coverage of the Red Sox organization soon. So keep your ears to the feed. Thanks for listening. And here's Brian. All right. Well, we are once again very happy to welcome back to the podcast Red Sox Director of Player Development, Brian Abraham. Brian, it's always a pleasure to have you on. You are out in sunny Arizona right now. While it's kind of funny to see like Ian and I in the dark in the nighttime here on the East Coast, and I can see the sun coming through behind you, and it's very strange, but lucky you. But at any rate, you know, thank you for bringing the sunshine, literal and figurative, back to the podcast. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
No, thank you guys so much for having me. Always an honor to be on this podcast, and it is a little bit weird, you guys being in the dark, me being in the bright sun, but I'll take the heat at this point of the year anytime.
I bet.
It's been dark here for like 2 hours.
I know.
It's bad. It's amazing how quickly it turns.
The fall sucks.
I get why the season ends when it does for the minor leagues. For the minor leagues.
Well, if maybe a little unfortunate the season doesn't continue right now for the Red Sox Major League Club, I think it's fair to say, Brian, that on the farm and in the Red Sox organization this year, this was pretty much a banner season. You know, going back 20 years like we do, I honestly can't think of many years that went quite as well in the farm system as this year went for you all. I mean, if you look at the guys at the top that have either solidified their positions as among the best prospects in the game or broken out to become that, or even just depth guys popping up, and even the fact that you all traded 10 minor leaguers at the deadline and the system doesn't look decimated right now speaks to how the year went, I think, on the farm. When you look back at 2024, what stands out most to you in terms of, you know, is it the big 3/now 4 rising? Is it guys lower down in the rankings per se, but maybe not in your esteem taking steps forward? What really stands out most to you about how this season went, whether it's player-wise, process-wise, both? What do you think back on in the year that was for the Red Sox farm system?
Appreciate the kind words about the farm system. Certainly, I think there were a ton of positives over the year. And, you know, I think on our end, at the end of each season, our groups always like to look in the mirror and do our evaluation. We have goals that we put on paper and provide and share with each other at the start of the season. And by the end of the season, we have to look back and see where we are on objectively. And, you know, if we reached our organizational goals, and that's not only on the player side, but that's the staff side. And that's individually with the players. And then I think as a group, whether it be overall pitching, overall hitting, defense, those types of things. So I think it was definitely a positive year. We saw a lot of individual improvements. We saw some of our higher end players reach the upper levels and be very, very close, if not already be major league depth, knocking on the door to potentially being impact players in the big leagues, which I think is obviously the goal of a minor league system, and then creating a sustainable stream of players to do that year in and year out. And I think we saw a lot of our players at the lower levels take those next steps to move into the middle parts of the farm, where while they're not necessarily major league depth yet, I think they provide a higher floor of the farm system, more opportunity for players to be impactful, more opportunity for players to be those higher end prospects or touching the top hundreds of different external rankings. And I think continuing to create value for us on the major league side, or for trades or other opportunities that might come Brez's in the leadership group's way this upcoming offseason. I think there's still a ways to go. I think I also, for me in my role, I think creating, adding different staff members, creating some systems and processes and putting them in place for us to have the continued success that we're looking to have year in and year out, really driving our organizational KPIs, having very clear and transparent goals for our players and for our staff as well that they can work toward, and being very aware of what all of us need to do to get to those places that we are trying to go. So that comes with a lot of communication, that comes with a lot of different conversation, that comes with really hiring really, really good people that are aligned with our thoughts of where we need to go on the field and off the field as well. And then working together to put everything in place for everyone for it to be a well-oiled machine and have that success year in and year out, like I said. So I don't think it's easy to look at one year and have it say it's successful. But to me, the best organizations, the best farm systems really are successful when they sustain that success year in and year out. Players reach the big leagues year in and year out. Players are impactful at the big leagues year in and year out. And we continue to progress and improve no matter what happens, whether that be trades, injuries, losing staff members, all those types of things. So definitely excited about where we are, but I think I'm even more excited about where we're going, and the foundation and the staff and the processes we have in place to continue to improve and grow, and we'll continue to challenge ourselves to be even better than we are.
It really did feel, you mentioned the processes and things like that, that you all instituted. To us, it might seem like the past year. I'm sure you're kind of sitting there thinking this is not a this past year thing by any stretch. It's a progression, but it really did seem on the outside looking in like there was a lot that did change in how the farm system worked, how player development worked this year. What do you think was the biggest change this year? And, granted, a lot of people are going to say this as, well, Craig Breslow is now the guy in charge. A guy who you were his bullpen catcher at one point, if I'm remembering right. Like, what is there a biggest change from the past year? And because people are going to ask that for it being Breslow's first year, but what do you think really stands out among those things? Is it, bat speed training, velocity training, something we're not even thinking of, something we're not even aware of outside looking in?
Yeah, I think it's those couple of things you talked about. I think it's all staff members working together, understanding that ultimately we're trying to create value for our players, create value for that major league club, identifying the root cause of performance in each area, and then working backwards from there to figure out how we can get there. With the bodies, with the performance that is happening on the field, with the actual training that is happening, connecting all those things to ultimately allow for the goals to be achieved. So I think every department has their individual performance indicators that they're working toward, and ultimately the performance indicators should come together, and that's creating a valuable major league player that can sustain success over a long period of time. I don't think it's just it's easy to look at, again, like I said, it's easy to look at one year and just say, hey, things clicked this year, but it's hard to not look at the past few seasons, to look at the turnover of the staff, getting people that are aligned and believe the same things, people that can have different skill sets that can provide different things to the organization, and can relate to players and provide the ideas and the thoughts and the education to players to provide to them what we want and what we're looking for, so they can buy into, for lack of a better word, what we're selling. But it's very much so a teamwork between the staff and the players. We can provide all the information, we can provide all the ideas, we can provide all the thoughts, but if the player does not buy in, if the player is not taking hold of their own career and taking hold of what their process is, what their goals are, then it's going to be really hard to get there. So, we really put a lot of onus on the player, and that comes with creating those relationships, creating very clear feedback loops, transparency, understanding of what we're doing and why we're doing it. That's probably the number one, the why of why we're asking them to do certain things. And then again, working the day in and day out with our affiliate staff, getting into the grind of the daily work and the different activities and programming that we have for individual players, and working towards the goals that we have for them. So it definitely doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. It takes a staff that is aligned and motivated, and constantly questions and pushes back on what they think they know, to ultimately figure out better ways of doing things and more efficient ways and more effective ways to allow our players to optimize the players that they are, who they can be.
The way those processes play out, I mean, I guess starting with, bat speed, I guess just bat speed training, just to pick one, on the offensive side of the ball, BA just had a whole feature about what y'all did this year with that, at least on the offensive side of the ball with that and the swing decisions and launch angle or angle off the bat, things like that. I guess with the bat speed training, is that something where, you started and there's like a plateau you think a guy's going to get to, or is that just the kind of thing that keeps going forward? Is it, you reach a plateau and then it becomes more of a maintenance sort of thing? How does that really progress? Because I think a lot of folks who are listening to this are probably like used to, take a nice level swing and, swing at strikes and not at balls. And, maybe if they had a particularly progressive coach, it was, the Ted Williams swing with an uppercut. But I think for a lot of, there's not a lot of, oh yeah, I remember learning that when I was in high school or Legion ball or whatever for a lot of folks.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, the best big leaguers and the guys who get paid the most hit the ball really hard, really consistently, and generally that is, to the pull side in the air. So I think it's just really looking at a matter of numbers and placing bets on where you feel like you can make the most impact. I think one of the misnomers is that we are telling guys to only pull the ball and take pitches on the outer half and try to yank it to the pull side. That is certainly not the case at all. We just feel like, pulling the ball intentionally is not something that you train often as a young player or as a player coming up. You're always told to, hey, let's look the other way. Let's hit it through the middle. All great things. You need to have the ability to manipulate the barrel. You need to have bat to ball skills. You need to be able to fight off a 1-2 pitch and drive the ball the other way for a single instead of, trying to hit a home run every single pitch. But I think, you need to train on what you're deficient in. And sometimes a lot of our players are deficient in pulling the ball in the air because they don't practice it too often. So, we're trying to put our money where our mouth is and train that a little bit more intentionally. And I think bat speed allows for that to happen. Again, hitting the ball hard, hitting the ball in the air, extra base hits, impact, doing damage, ultimately to score runs, which is the name of the game. So it's not just weighted bats. It's not just overload underload. It's a combination of that plus a significant relationship with our strength conditioning group to add weight, add strength, and work together. So the two can combine to ultimately allow for more impact and damage when these guys are up at the plate and barreling the baseball up. So in terms of where guys could eventually go, I think we're going to there is different programming for different types of players. Some players have to have a little bit more intensive training where they're doing it 2-3 times, maybe 4 times a week, where others are probably a little bit more maintenance and they're doing it 2 times a week, maybe 1 time a week based on how they feel, based on where they are in the season. Certainly the off season is the best time to do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to this type of thing. But I know there are a lot of guys who have, because they've been with the organization now for a couple of years and we've been doing it, they like to have it be a part of their daily routine, 2 times a week. We have very specific programming for every player. It's very individualized. And at the start of each week, they're all given what they're expected to do. And it's not bat speed every day. Bat speed is certainly a part of that. For some, it might be, like I said, for some, it might be 3 times. For others, it might be 2 times. For others, it might be 1 time. And again, it very much depends on who the player is, what their goals are to allow them to have the success that we want at upper levels, on top of where they are within their own career, what they feel like their goals are. Again, we're not going to force players to do it. We're going to educate them, provide them with the understanding of this is why we want you to do these things. And the hope is if we're clear enough, if we're honest enough, if we have the right training environments, that players are going to want to do it. And, I think we have some players that have done it, that have showed the success that that they want, that we want, that has allowed for other players to say, okay, I think I can buy in a little bit more of this, whether it be adjust a little bit for it to benefit them individually. I think it's a nice combination of all those things. But it is a pretty important piece of what we do. You can't hit the ball hard if you don't swing the ball fast. There are probably some outliers here and there, and I'm sure people like to choose the 1 or 2 major league players that don't do it well, but they do other things very, very well. They have optimal bat path where they're hitting the ball at the perfect angles to hit the ball in the air pull side where they can hit more home runs. But I'd say for the most part, most minor league players, if you're not swinging the bat fast, you just can't hit the ball hard enough to be a big leaguer for multiple years. And it's just, we're data driven, and we are looking at information and numbers to help prove that. And just trying to be as honest as we can with our players to make sure that they have the best path to have the success that they want.
You mentioned the guys getting weekly kind of, I guess not workout plan. It's a weekly development plan, maybe is what I might refer to as. Is that like every player in the system? Who's setting that up? How are they getting that? Like, how does that work? Are they getting that on like the Monday travel day for the full season guys, or how does that process work?
Yeah, no, good question. I think on the pitching and the hitting side, and quite honestly, the defensive side as well. Driven from Andrew Wright, Justin Willard, and Jason Ochart, there is some general overarching programming that we have that is pretty visible for all players and all staff members to see. Here's various days on what certain drills are. And then at the start of each week, our coordinators, whether it be Dylan Lawson, Howie Roberson, Nick Gotti, previously Chris Mears, would provide those plans to our affiliate staff members. And then players do have some ownership over what they do. They might be given a day of bat speed, but they have the ability to choose, 4 out of 8 drills or 2 out of 4 drills. And then they can kind of work their programming to benefit or to feel where they feel most comfortable, on top of working on what they need to work on to achieve the particular priority goals that we have laid out for them. So it's certainly starts at the top from the leadership level, but we are very, very reliant on our affiliate staff to drive the programming, to build those relationships with the players, to have the conversation with the players, to talk about them post-game, post-week, whether it be an after action report for a pitcher, or whether it be a swing decision report for a position player, or just a bat-to-ball report on a position player. So we're very, very, very reliant on our affiliate staff, the guys on the ground, to really get a lot of this work in. But the oversight comes from the coordinators and obviously the directors as well, to make sure that a lot of that programming and then the goals that are trying to be reached are progressing, or potentially, staying stagnant or regressing. And then if that's the case, that we change the prescription, just like you would if you were sick and you were given medicine. And that is, to me, one of the most important pieces, tracking and seeing where each player is, and doing that daily, weekly, monthly, to adjust accordingly. Because I think it's really important to understand that we can do all these drills. We can do everything. We can provide bat speed, weighted ball programs for pitchers, for velo. If you're not tracking it and seeing where guys are and understanding what is working or not working, it's really hard to learn from the programming that's happening, and then ultimately make adjustments or allow the players to continue to progress in the way that we are asking them to progress.
Interesting. So I presume the velocity training, it's another thing that we've, heard a lot about, and we've seen on-field gains from guys. I mean, I can still remember Ian coming back not even coming back, when he was in Greenville, and he's like, hey guys, Gabriel Jackson, we might need to pay more attention here again. Was he throwing 96 or something, Ian? Like, it was just like,
I saw him
okay.
at 98, I think.
Did you?
Like
yeah,
90 to 92 in spring training.
It was like, this isn't, 92 mile an hour sinkers anymore. The gains that some of the guys saw with this, I mean, is that another thing that plays out similarly to what you just described? Again, is it different prescriptions for different players and what they need in their games? What goes for picking a random guy, an Isaac Coffey versus a Ryan Zephyr-John or Luis Guerrero. They obviously are two completely different kind of pitchers. How does that play out with a different kind of pitcher? Is it just everyone do this and we see how it plays out? How does that work?
Yeah, I think, again, on both the hitting and the pitching side, there are going to be some foundational drills, foundational programming that every player is going to do, whether it be every day or a couple times a week. And then, through our strength conditioning programming, our biomechs, understanding of biomech, from our pitching coaches or hitting coaches, that's when you start to adjust individually about what each player needs to do. And that is very dependent on what those players' goals are. So Isaac Coffey's priority goal might be fastball velocity, where Luis Guerrero's might be competitive pitch percentage, throwing more strikes in the strike zone. So their training is going to be a little bit different. But I think another thing that really helps with this is the structured work that's happening between outings, that's happening pre-game on the hitting side as well, being very competitive with our training environments, being very intentional with our training environments, and allowing guys to work really hard pre-game. So, the games in the minor leagues matter, but at the end of the day, they're just preparing you for the major leagues. No one looks back at Hall of Famers and says, man, I cannot believe the minor league career that, David Ortiz had. He was incredible. It just doesn't work that way. No one cares until you're in the big leagues. Do we want guys to have success? Do we want guys to put up numbers and impact the baseball and throw hard and get strikeouts? All those things, yes, because ultimately that is going to provide us a better understanding and idea of where they potentially may go. And it will allow us to make more informed decisions about if this player is going to be with us, if we need to move this player, if they need to be in a different position or different role. All those things do matter, but the training and the competitive environments that are happening pre-game, I think, are so vital to the success and the development of our players, and probably undervalued. Or I would say we undervalued it at times, quite frankly. And I think, the coaches and the different staff members we have in here now that all believe in this way of doing things, working together has allowed for significant gains by a lot of players. Understanding that if you go out in a game and maybe the results aren't exactly there, the process behind that game action might actually allow you to have success that you want down the road. And, at the end of the day, it's the process over the results in the minor leagues when you're ultimately hoping for those results to come when you step onto Fenway Park and you have to have 4 at-bats or you have to come in the 7th inning. That's when you're hoping the results matter. Even then, I'd argue that the process is incredibly important because you need to continue to progress, need to continue to develop when you are a big leaguer, because the league is too good and people make too many adjustments for you to face on a daily basis, for you to just be happy with where you are.
See, e.g. Duran, Jaron.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think you can get a better example of that than him. You gave me great lead-ins to 2 of the questions I had after this, so this is going superbly in terms of flow. But I guess at the end there, you did mention like positional versatility and guys moving around the diamond. We've talked about that before, and I looked today, and the only guy who wasn't a rehabber who was stateside, who didn't play multiple positions this year, other than a first baseman or catcher, which is kind of a different situation, was Vaughn Grissom, who I think I would argue is essentially kind of a rehab situation. Even Marcelo got the 1 game at third to take him off of that list. But what are the conversations that happen about guys getting looks at different positions? I mean, look, the outfield is one thing, but moving a guy around the infield might be a little different. Between both might be different. But how do those conversations happen, and how does that get balanced at a given level where, for example, Salem at the end of the year has Zanatello, Arias, Anderson, Alcantara, not to mention Cespedes on the IL were he healthy. How does that all fit together? Is it just one giant puzzle? Is it just kind of, all right, we're getting 6 starts at short this week, go 2-2-1-1 or whatever, however it winds up breaking down. How does that process play out? Is it something that has to happen weekly just for that reason, or is there maybe a longer term process in place for how that works on your end?
Well, I think organizationally, I think we just believe in value and versatility. That's something that is important. And I would just also, on top of that, is it's it's hard to say that a 17, 18, or 19-year-old shortstop is definitely going to be a shortstop in the next 3 or 4 years. There's a lot of different factors that could come into play. There's things that happen to the major league team. There's body changes. There's acquisitions. There's just a lot of different things that can happen. So I think early on, especially, we want to expose guys to different areas to give them an opportunity to have success and challenge them to do things that they maybe hadn't done previously. I think our training environments pre-game allow for a lot of that as well. If you go to Salem early in the season, we have our second baseman take ground balls at shortstop. We have our first baseman take ground balls at third base. It's just a chance to force their bodies to do different things, throw the ball from different angles, field the ball from different positions, to allow their body to adjust and adapt to more complicated movements that eventually will allow them to have success at a position maybe they play more consistently at the upper levels or in the big leagues. It can definitely get challenging at the upper levels when someone kind of turns into or transitions into more of a one position type player. But even at the upper levels too, whether it be minor league free agents, major league depth, we have to provide different opportunities for different players. And one thing I was told as a young person in player development is, don't let the first time a player does something be in the big leagues. And that's something that has always stuck with me, whether that be a pinch hit, whether that be a pinch run, whether that be playing third base, whether that be playing first base or the outfield. Granted, there could be a time where a player goes up to the big leagues and, all of a sudden, Mickey Gasper's pitching in a game. We didn't have him pitch in the minor leagues. But I think for the most part, for whether it be Marcelo or Christian Campbell, we don't know exactly what position is going to be available when they are ready to be on the big league team. We're hoping they push us and they force us to make a decision that they're going to make the team. The position might be third base. The position might be second base. The position might be center field, for a multitude of reasons. And it might not always be performance related. It might be because of an injury. It might be because of a trade. So I think that's something we keep in mind. On top of continuing to try to create value for different players. Up the middle, being a plus defender up the middle is incredibly valuable. Being a plus defender anywhere is really valuable, but maybe becoming a solid defender, a tick above average defender at shortstop might be more valuable than being a above average defender at second base. It doesn't always equal out that way, but if someone can play shortstop in the big leagues 2 to 3 times per week, I promise you that's incredibly valuable for a major league team if something happens at certain times. I remember when I was with the Blue Jays, Marco Scudero was on the team, and he had been a utility player with the A's forever. He ended up playing a little bit more shortstop. I forget who got hurt, but someone got hurt, and he ended up becoming the everyday shortstop. And then he signed a multi-year deal for a lot of money. And it's giving guys the opportunity to take advantage of the opportunities they're given, but also making sure that we are checking all the boxes to make sure that we're not missing something, or we're not seeing something that maybe a player hasn't shown us that might be more valuable. I mean, Christian Campbell is a great example. He came in as a second baseman, and to see him move around the diamond, and especially on the dirt, and how good of a defender he is at shortstop, at third base, and at second base, I don't think all of us thought that maybe when he came in, and to see him transition fairly seamlessly in the outfield as well. Granted, he hadn't play out there as much as he could have, but he can play all 3 outfield spots, and he's a middle of the order everyday player. Those guys just don't come around too often. And I think the versatility is what makes him valuable. And I think he likes it too. That there's a part of that the player, some guys like to stay in the same spot, but I think the players these days, they just want to play and put them in different spots, give them different opportunities to have the success that they want. I think is something that we look at and value, and we'll continue to do until there's a point where it's like, hey, we need to focus on Marcelo just playing third base today because the shortstop position is locked in for the near future. Okay, let's get him some reps at third base. I'm sure if you really dug into some of our playing time, you could probably see there are certain trends of players playing particular positions for extended periods of time. And those are all intentional because of an injury at the big leagues, possible call-up, different things that may happen. But there also is, like Chris, you had mentioned earlier, there is a piece of this of having to get guys in the lineup at different times, and they all can't play shortstop every game. So I think there is a part of that having to move guys around is a part of just getting guys in the lineup as well, which it ultimately becomes a positive for them and a chance for us to expose them to new things.
You mentioned one of the things we were going to ask about. One of the things that really stuck out in that sense this year was when Christian Campbell got a chance, not even a chance, became the everyday shortstop in Portland when Marcelo went down. What went into the decision there as an example of like, okay, we're going to get Christian a look at short. Not only are we going to get him a look, he's going to play here every day, more or less for about a month, where I think he actually might have played shortstop more than any other position this year when I don't know how much he even played it in college. He certainly didn't play it, last year in the system and hadn't played it, I don't think, this year until that point.
Yeah, shortstop is a very valuable position. Looking internally at some of our information and in the data we received, he was very strong in the ability to convert balls into outs and had really strong range. So it made sense for him to potentially be a really good shortstop. We don't just throw someone out there. He took plenty of ground balls, and we felt him out there and talked to him about how he felt about it, and he felt really good. And I think I was there for the first game he played. He made a play in the hole and looked like he'd been playing shortstop for the past 5-6 years. So his adjustability is just really, really good as well. I think it's a very unique player, and his ability to, like I talked about earlier, put his body in different positions, throw from different angles, read the ball off the bat. All those things are above average. So it allows him to have maybe more success than someone who doesn't do those things well. His first step quickness is incredibly strong, so he gets to balls really quick. All the things that you hope for from an athlete, he does really well. So it just translated really well to him being a shortstop. And as we know, catcher, shortstop, center field, those positions are incredibly valuable for an organization. So when you have a guy who can impact the baseball like he does, when he can play shortstop, that's something that we looked at and felt like we could take advantage of with Marcelo out to get him some reps where maybe he wouldn't have been able to otherwise for the obvious reasons of Marcelo. So opportunity was there, presented itself. We took advantage of it. I would say ultimately the plan was to get him reps at shortstop. He probably got a little bit more than maybe we initially expected, but I think at the end of the day, it was a really good development opportunity for him. And he took advantage of the chance that he had up the middle.
Mm-hmm. I guess maybe the pitcher version of that would be working as a starter versus a reliever and, lumping piggyback reliever in with the starter. It's more true reliever role versus length role, maybe weekly length role in that rotation. When did the discussions about how to, how to put a guy, when to put a guy in which role at what time, when to make a bullpen move for a guy who, look, we all know that every player working as a starter in the minors isn't necessarily going to be a starter in the major leagues. That's nothing new. That's nothing earth shattering. But how do those discussions work now? You mentioned not wanting the first time a guy to work in a role to be in the major leagues. And I remember times in the past where, first time a guy would work in relief would be in the majors, and it just seemed kind of crazy. When do you guys have those talks? What goes into those? How early do you think to kind of pull the trigger on that kind of move? How often is it seen as maybe a temporary thing just to kind of maybe get a guy right before moving him back? How does that discussion play out for a given player?
Yeah, it's definitely individualized. I don't think there's a template to say, hey, this is what we're going to do to every pitcher. But I would say, generally speaking, we want to lengthen guys out. We want to give them opportunity to pitch. We want to give them opportunity to work on their pitches and throw those competitively within game situations. Some of the other factors are, body type, the ability to recover, what work needs to be done in between outings. Some guys need more time in between outings to recover and also work on their craft than maybe a reliever. There are some relievers that can throw 2-3 times per week, have a side session, throw with intent competitively, and still be able to bounce back fairly well versus maybe a starter who's throwing once a week that has a really strong side session that's, in a lot of ways, a 2 to 3 inning start in the bullpen where they're throwing very competitively, very intentionally because they need to work on velocity improvement or pitch design. And the only way you can do that is if you are throwing with intent, with effort. So I think the hope is all of our players, all of our arms are good enough to be stretched out to starters, as you noted. That is not always the case, and that certainly is not the case. But the reality is there's not a ton of strict relievers that work their way all the way up from the lower levels to the big leagues. Mm-hmm. It does happen, but it is, I think all of our pitchers, we want to throw multiple innings. that is something that almost needs to be done, because very rarely is a guy being called up and he's not being asked to do that. Even, Luis Guerrero, who is a closer type in AAA, like he needs to be able to go 2, potentially 3 innings, because when he's in the big leagues, that is going to likely be his role when he gets up there. And that's what his role was. So I think we just want to continue to get the amount of innings, build up that workload, build up the amount of pitches these guys can throw competitively, and balance that with the work that is being done in between outings. There is a piece of this too. Our pitching group, we look at arsenals, we look at the ability to project whether or not a pitcher will be a starter or a reliever, depending on, if they have 2 pitches, 3 pitches, 4 pitches. There's not a lot of 2-pitch starters. So maybe there's an opportunity to develop a 3rd pitch out of the bullpen in shorter stints versus having a guy throw every 6 days and throw 2 pitches and try to work on a 3rd pitch there. So there's a bunch of different factors that come into play. And, we're really lucky to have someone like Justin Willard, who's really embraced the role and has transitioned incredibly well into the leadership role over the major league and minor league side of pitching. And I think at the end of the day, what he wants to do is get guys innings, get guys the ability to work. The only way you get better is if you pitch. The only way you can get stronger is if you lift. So those types of things are really valuable for us. And the more guys throw, the more we feel like we can allow them to be impactful and continue to improve.
One such guy you mentioned, Guerrero. The other one that kind of fits in that box this year for a guy who came up late is Zack Penrod. At this point, what's his role going forward? Is that still a discussion that needs to happen? Is he a bullpen guy for good? Is he going to come in and stretch out and see what it looks like in spring training? What's the idea with him right now on his role next year coming into camp?
When we transitioned him to the bullpen role in Worcester, we told him to plan on coming back next year as a starter. So that was a very clear and honest conversation that we had beforehand. The conversation was, hey, we might have an opportunity to get you to the big leagues in a role that is a non-starter. So we want to help prepare you for that opportunity. And he bought in, and it happened relatively quick. So really excited that he got that opportunity and got the chance to go up there. And thought he did a really good story. Feel like he's been with us for a long time, but it's only been a couple of years.
Right.
Yeah, he'll plan on coming back next year as a starter, but also reserve the right to change pending what happens in the off season and different things that could happen with the roster.
You got to be careful. You know what my day job is here. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of funny you mentioned that the Netflix folks had a field day with the Feelgood stories that came up this year between like him, Boozer, Sogard, Gasper. My God, maybe ideally you don't need quite as many of those in a given season, but certainly a lot of good ones this year.
Yeah, I mean, good players, good people. I think those things are always good for fans to see, and I know for us, it's. Our acquisitions group does an incredible job of obviously trying to find talent, but I do think there is a part of being a good person and being able to listen and being willing to make adjustments and being able to trust others that is incredibly valuable with players. And when you can combine those two things, I think that's when organizations are able to run optimally. And that group does an incredible job of being able to find those types of players.
I can still remember horror stories of hearing about guys in spring training who refused to do the running, and so they just wind up on the restricted lists. But yeah, anyway, one thing we always get asked about a fair amount is promotions, and I know we've kind of talked. I don't remember how much of it was on the last time you were on the podcast versus when we just kind of see around the field or things like that. But it did kind of strike, not to speak for Ian or anyone else at the site, but this year it did kind of strike me at least that the decision with the then so-called Big Three, which has now, expanded its ranks, that the decision to promote those guys together did seem to be a bit of a planned thing. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but it did seem a little bit different than what promotion decisions might look like for other players. I could be completely wrong on that. Please tell me if I am. I will take no offense. But what goes into that sort of a situation where maybe it is a little different with guys who are, top prospects in the game. And these are guys who last offseason were identified as the future of the organization, for better or worse, right? They're getting rolled out at winter weekend. They're getting mentioned by the ownership. How does that decision play out on your end? Royal, you meaning player development, and you personally, but how does that work? And where does that decision start and come from, and when does the trigger get pulled on that sort of thing? And how might that play into, when they might get a shot in the big leagues versus another guy who gets called up when there's just a need short term?
Yeah, good question. I think they are unique. I think that it's okay to say that, and I think it's okay to be honest about that. They are our higher end prospects. They are, I think, externally, internally, they are, we hope the future of the Red Sox in a lot of different ways, and I think they've embraced that. They've worked their butts off to get to where they are, and they've talked publicly about wanting to win together in Boston. The conversations are honestly probably happening way more than people can ever imagine, daily, hourly at times. And I don't know if there's always there's not an exact time that's right. It's not like, hey, if we wait until Tuesday, then we made the right decision to promote these guys. I think there were different times of the year where one could have gone or two could have gone, or one seemed like maybe they were ready to go, but there were different things that happened throughout the season as well that prevented a couple times where we were having some of these conversations a little bit more seriously, whether that be someone missing a day or two throughout the season, or a guy not feeling as well at the plate as we thought he should have when we're moving them. So there are different factors that come into play. We obviously want guys to go up in a really good position, have them feel great, have them be playing well, have them have an easy move from Greenville to Portland to Worcester, whatever it may be. But the reality is it just doesn't always work out like that. I do think one thing that we do try to do more so than the past is we try to have that off day be a nice little in-between day for us to give guys a little bit of a breath. They can travel on the Sunday or travel on the Monday. They have a little bit more time to get to wherever they're going, whether it be travel afar to an away affiliate or go to a home affiliate. Greenville to Portland is not that short of a drive for a lot of players that like to drive. So we need to think about those types of things, guys moving out of their apartments. But I would say on the baseball side, for those three in particular, looking at it internally and externally, just a lot of different conversations we had. At the end of the day, we just felt like the performance and the timing was right for them to move together. The big three, I think, is probably a little bit overblown by the media. Big four, I think, is a little bit overblown by the media. They are all individual players for us. We're really excited about who they are as a group. There's a handful of other guys. We like to say, the big 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whoever those players are, that are a part of that group. But I think for that particular moment, that particular instance, it just, again, throughout the conversations we had with, myself, obviously, Brez and Paul Taboni are very, very involved in this, that it just felt right at the time that we had. And, unfortunately, Marcelo was banged up at the time. We were hoping it was going to be a couple-day thing. And, luckily our medical department and Marcelo figured out that it was not going to be. And we did not have him play the rest of the year. But felt like just the uniqueness of the group going, that it was important for him to go as well. And I think it was the right decision. He got to spend some time in Worcester. He got to spend some time with the coaching staff, some of the players, and be around his teammates that he very much cares about. He is one of the best teammates that we have, I would say, in this organization, despite the high recognition he's received as since he's been an amateur, to have the ability to connect with different people, different coaches, through English speaking and Spanish speaking, and be a leader on and off the field has been really fun to see over the years. So allowing him to go with that group, because he deserved it. I think it's one of the things that's lost. I know he ended the season on the IL, but he had a really, really strong year on both sides of the baseball, that I think if maybe he hadn't been with us for a few years, probably would have been maybe promoted a little bit more. But I would say for us, if you had asked me what a good season was, minus the injury, I think Marcel had it. He hit the ball harder. He played it. He had improved defense, just overall as a defender. He matured. He became more of a leader. Definitely a little bit, but I think his swing and miss is still a little bit high, but it crept down more so than it was in the past. He's chased less, more walks, less strikeouts. Overall, just a really, really strong year that I think I don't want people to forget of how strong a year he had, and he was deserving of the promotion. It wasn't just like, hey, Christian and Roman and Kyle are coming. Let's bring Marcelo as well. Marcelo, I think, deserved it just as much, if not more, than the other two. Unfortunately, he was just banged up. So again, there's a bunch of different factors that come into play. We've talked about this in the past in terms of performance metrics and their goals. They exceeded them. They reached them and exceeded them. And then it's just a balance of them going up to Worcester, having everyday playing time. Once you're in Worcester, you're major league depth. That is a real thing. So we need to be prepared that if something happened, that Roman Anthony could get called up to the big leagues, in a certain situation. Kyle Teal could get called up to the big leagues in a certain situation. So balancing all those different things, I think, really is something that we tried to do. And at the end of the day, we used the information we have and made the most informed decision that we had with that information. It felt like it was the best one to move them together. And I like to think too, the friendship part of me, the part of me that really values these guys being really strong teammates and playing together in Boston for years to come. I think that's pretty cool too. We don't always talk about those things, I think, from the front office perspective. And, we're very data driven and we want to be objective and all those things. But there is a human element of this that I think is really valuable. And those guys wanting to move together and be together and having that all happen together, I think is a real thing. And I think at the end of the day, they appreciated it. And, hopefully it will continue. I don't know if it's going to happen all together in Boston when you have 3 or 4 guys coming up together at once. But I think they know that. I think they know we treat them each as individuals, but in certain situations, they could be moved together because that is best. That is what is best for them individually and as the organization as a whole.
Transitioning a little bit, maybe not quite as smooth as the past 12 of them have been, but wanted to ask you a little bit about some of the guys that joined the organization this year from the draft. We know that there was the Bridge League happening, as some referred to it. I don't know if that's what it was called in-house at Fort Myers. All right. But that, the guys were playing games 3 times a week, I guess, against the Twins. So I know that was happening, but at least as far as the guys who came in from the draft, I was going to ask generally what they were doing, but I guess maybe just to start to make sure we hit on a couple of key guys. Braden Montgomery, obviously the first rounder, came in with an existing injury from the Super Regional. What's his status? Was he a full participant in the Bridge League? Was he rehabbing? What's his status now for fall training season? And what's he looking at coming through the offseason and into next year?
Yeah, he was in a boot for most of the time he was with us during the Bridge season part of the year. But he's out of that. He's in full baseball activity now, running, hitting, all those things. So, full normal off season with obviously continued strength and recovery as just a normal injury would entail. But his focus really went during the time when he was with us after we drafted him was just strength gains, really integrating into our programming and getting a better understanding of what we're doing and what we felt like he could do to improve as a baseball player. But it was really body focused, physically focused, trying to add some really good weight in preparation for off-season training. But he's fully healthy. It's certainly, I'm sure, for him just as much as us, frustrating he couldn't play. But at the end of the day, I don't think anyone's going to remember the last couple months other than the progress that he's made, the gains that he's made physically to prepare himself for a really strong 2025.
Is how much of a priority is that for the guys who come in from the draft? Like, are the pitchers coming in? Are they throwing very much in the Bridge League who are new to the system? Obviously, excluding the couple of Tommy John guys, but or is it more just build your body? You just had a college season, or I can't remember if there are any high schools other than the one I'm going to ask about. But how much of it is focused on just getting them in and teaching them this is what happens at the complex versus getting them into games?
Yeah, we have a first-year player program where we have a lot of our coordinators, myself, we present to the players, explain to them what, we value, what our organization is about, the importance of being representing Boston, representing their families, like a lot of good things that I'm sure a lot of organizations do. I would say, generally speaking, coming in, the thought is we want to prepare these guys for next season. Not that the season is important, not that we don't value the season, but there are, I think the majority of the players are going there to train, continue to add strength, get stronger, and prepare themselves for a really long season that they've never endured ever before as an amateur. Depending on who we draft, that could change. The Will Turners, the Zach Earharts of the world, these guys that have played high-end college baseball, we're going to move them a little bit quicker on the position player side. We're going to get them an opportunity to play, and I think it's just some game reps Greenville obviously being the place where those guys went, along with Hudson White, because they are advanced college players, and it gives them a really, I think, a step up on the competition as they progress next year. For the arms, different situation. I think, as we all know, taking care of an arm is something that is really valuable for an organization. So they all go through their post-draft shoulder testing. For the most part, the reality is, after they have thrown an entire season or whatever they have thrown or had time off from, they need either rest, recovery, or strengthening after their draft and after they get into the organization. So that is the focus. There were a few guys that we sent to Salem that we felt like they were either in a current throwing program, they had a little bit more recent throwing programming within their own time away before they were drafted, that we felt like we could send them to Salem. So we took advantage of that as well. But I think for the most part, it was adding strength, adding weight, weighted ball programs, throwing program that we would do, everything on the kind of the back, the backfields in Fort Myers in preparation for this winter, in preparation for next year. A lot of education, a lot of understanding who they are, what we are trying to get them to do, what they want to be, optimizing their stuff and optimizing their mechanics for them to have the success that we want in the long run. So it's great for guys to throw. I think the Bridge League and the way the season has transitioned, I think, has allowed us to be a little bit more focused on development versus game action. Like in the past, we've had to have guys pitch in FCL games. Like that, we don't have the choice. We need arms. This year, we did not have to do that. And I think it was very clear, during our conversations last offseason, that this is what we were going to do. Obviously, we went a little bit heavier with the pitching in the draft this year. And we felt like we could be a little more aggressive on the development side versus focus on game action as maybe we were forced to do in the past.
One really unique player development case that you're going to have to crack this coming year is Conrad Cason, he was drafted as a two-way player. First guy that y'all have had in the system since Casey Kelly that played both ways like that. Although I guess we could probably count. I'm trying to think who it wasn't. Joe Davis. Who was the guy in Salem not in Salem, in Greenville, that wound up pitching in all the blowouts? Who was the big first base type? It's a
Albert Feliz.
Albert Feliz, maybe.
Well, that was this year, but yeah, I wasn't even thinking of him. But yeah, he. It was very funny to see him at the top of a lot of our pitcher leaderboards this year. Dunn's going to kill me. He's going to know this off the top of his head. Anyway, but a two-way guy, haven't seen that in the Shohei Ohtani era. What is the plan for him this year? Is there one? How is that going to work if you're able to divulge that at this point? What's the plan for him for 2025 at least? And I'm sure that it's going to be, we'll see what happens from there. But
yeah, I mean, first off, we do see him as a legitimate two-way player. I think their guys definitely drafted that is what they're listed as, and it quickly transitions into being one or the other. When he first came in, it was mostly offensive focused, shoulder strengthening. Really had him focused on being a hitter, but as we progressed, he started throwing more. We incorporated some of our throwing programming into his athletic throwing programming as an infielder. So, when he's playing catches with the infielders, there are some pitching type drills that honestly we use for both our position players and our pitchers that he was incorporating a little bit more intentionally than maybe we would have done in the past. So the focus during the fall, I guess the Bridge League and then early on post-Bridge League was as a position player. But this offseason, he's preparing to do both. He threw towards the end of the fall workout programming, so we could get a better feel for where his stuff was. But we're really excited about the player. Incredibly athletic, hits the ball hard, throws the ball hard, everything that you want. And I think a really strong foundation for growth and someone we get to know these kids really quick, and sometimes you just really connect with guys. He seems like someone who's connected with everyone really, really fast. He just wants information. He works really hard, and he's really excited to be a really good player. So it's balancing all those things to making sure that we're taking care of him physically, mentally, and making sure that the work is consistent on both sides. And it's Justin and Oach talking That's Andrew Wright talking, and preparing a plan for him to handle all facets, because it is unique. Since I've been farm director, we definitely have not had a player where we've had to deal with both. If a guy's playing shortstop throwing, pitchers usually don't throw like that when they're not pitching. It's, I think we've seen, Shohei Ohtani, Tommy John after a certain amount of time. So I think balancing the two areas, pitching and hitting on the development side, is something that we'll continue to focus on, and we have constant conversations about, but we will have a plan in place for him to be able to handle both and develop within both areas. And if there comes a point when he either makes a decision or we have to make a decision, we'll get to that, but we're not there yet.
Ian, you wanted to jump in with something?
Yeah, I was just something follow up about the pitchers that you talked about. How soon, when they get into the system, do you start using, the cameras and talking about pitch optimization, like changing grips, deliveries, et cetera? When does that process start? Is that more something that, you start during the season, or is that more in the off season heading into 2025 is more when that processes kind of get going?
I think depending on what it is, it's really quick, to be quite honest with you, especially because they're not going to be playing games. They're going to be working with the throwing program and working in side sessions where let's take advantage of the time we have. Let's take advantage of the competitive environments that are not within games. So, Justin and I and our other pitching coordinator sat with each player that first week orientation and met with all the pitchers. And Justin really really focused on all the pitchers' strengths and what they do really well. And really, I think, first of all, optimizing those areas, the things that you do really well, whether it be velo, whether it be throwing strikes, whether it be throwing from unique angles, whether having unique pitch shapes, continue to focus on those areas of strength, but also understanding there might be some low-hanging fruit. I mean, Tolly's easy one. Obviously, he has a unique fastball, he has a unique arm slot, but he doesn't throw as hard as maybe someone from that size should be able to throw. So obviously the focus is going to be velocity training. All of our pitchers are going to do that right away, but I think for him specifically, it was a little bit more intentional from the start. And, we're not going to sugarcoat that right when he gets drafted. We're going to be honest. We're going to be transparent. We have information for most of the guys before we even draft them. So I think it's a balance of all those things. Like, hey, we're not going to completely reinvent the wheel here with you as a pitcher, but there's also a reason why we drafted you. And there's a reason why we feel like you can have the success that you think you can have and that we think you can have. And there's a reason why we think you can be a big leaguer. And here's why. And here's the plan moving forward to get there. So I think, Ian, I think you asked that because I think the age old, in the past, so it was like, oh, don't change a player. Like, you don't want to change too much. This is how they got here.
Yeah.
Which I think is true. Like, they did get there, but the reality is they got drafted in the 17th round. Okay. I mean, that's great, but I think they want to be a big leaguer. So what do they have to do to become a big leaguer? So I think being just honest and transparent as soon as we can, while we might not be making crazy wholesale adjustments at that point, it might not happen right away, but letting them know that this is what we're going to be working toward, and it's going to be a step-by-step process, is something that we try to do early.
Yeah, because I feel like a decade, even then 5-10 years ago, it was more like, we'll let the first season play out, and then heading into the off season, we'll kind of make those adjustments and figure it out. Whereas now it seems like the process kind of been accelerated.
I was going to say, I'd say pre-COVID with that for sure.
Yeah, there's definitely some pieces of that you want to let guys perform and play and do some things in pro ball. But I think, again, I know like Will Turner, with his batting stance, he took a fresh start in pro ball, an opportunity to make an adjustment. So while it wasn't maybe where he ends up at the start of next season, it was a chance for him to make an adjustment that he knew he wanted to make and that we knew he wanted to make in the short amount of time that he had to play. So I think, again, we always go back. It's very individualized. It's not one size fits all. It's who the player is, what the player is able to comprehend and take. So I think it's balancing all those things and really relying on our amateur group also and the information they've gathered to say, hey, I know you want to do this to this particular player, but he's really struggled making adjustments in his amateur career. So it might be better to take this a little bit slower than maybe someone who's really been able to make adjustments really quick during the time he was in college. So let's hit him in the face right when he gets there.
Speaking of one player I meant to hit on earlier, but we forgot to, he's not a draftee, but someone who was a recent draftee is Mikey Romero. And obviously his year started a little later. How does something like that impact your kind of plan heading forward? Because he obviously started the season late, went to the FCL, but he ended the season in Portland. Does he get an accelerated timeline because you start the season late and there's just not enough time to make up for it? Is it, hey, we still have these benchmarks that you need to hit? And can you talk a little about what you thought of him this season?
Yeah, you know, saying we're going to be proactively pushing guys because of the time that they start, I think is a little bit unfair, but I would be lying if I didn't say if this guy's starting a little bit later and we expected, our projections at the start of the season expected him to be in Double-A, that we weren't somewhat paying attention to that as well. So I think it's both. For Mikey, it's definitely been a tough road, and on and off the field in a lot of different ways. He added a ton of strength this past offseason. He was fully healthy this year. I think just playing every day was something that was really important to him. When he started the season, he was not playing every day. It was a bit of a slow build up in terms of his workload, in terms of his ability to play shortstop, in terms of his ability to play in the infield and just take multiple swings. But I think by the end of the season, he was playing almost every day in Portland, and we were really excited to see that. In terms of benchmarks, I think there are certain things that guys do at certain times you feel like they've reached the mark of needing the next challenge. Sometimes a benchmark is reached one day where it might not be sustainable over the week. But if we feel like a player can continue to work and progress towards a certain goal at the next level, we'd probably be a little bit more willing to push them. On top of the areas that they need to improve upon, aren't going to actually, I think, regress the performance that they've already had or the development that they've already had. A player might be hitting the ball. Their goal might be to impact the baseball at a certain rate over a certain period of time. Their next goal might be to lower their K rate. If we feel like the promotion is going to allow them to continue to improve the ability to impact the baseball, and their K rate might take a bit of a hit, but it will be able to be adjusted based on their time there, then we probably move them. If we feel like, hey, this player just swings and misses way too much outside of the zone, they haven't made any adjustments, we haven't seen any positive progress over the time, then maybe it's going to be something where like, hey, they need to continue to stay at the level they're at until the K rate drops, until their contact rate improves, until they chase less out of the zone, and then we'll be willing to make that decision. I think, not to go away from Mikey, but like Jhostynxon Garcia is a really good example of that, in my opinion. Like, he definitely had some chase. He definitely had some swing and miss when he was in Greenville. He was impacting baseball at a rate that was probably exceeded expectations for us. So it was like, hey, let's challenge him with the training that we feel like we have in place, with some of the progress that he's made within the training environments and some of the things that he's shown. We feel like he can hit the ground running in Portland. While it wasn't perfect, I think we still saw a guy who's really increased his value, who has become a high-end prospect for us that's now at the upper levels, who can play plus defense in the outfield and impacts the baseball pretty consistently. That, again, still has flaws, but was still able to work on those in Double-A. Mikey, I think overall very, very happy with the progress that he's made. Again, end of the season healthy, that was number one. That was number one for him as well. He got stronger. He hit the ball hard. I think ultimately we're just looking for consistency. He shows flashes. He shows flashes in the field. He shows flashes at the plate. He had different runs where he was driving the ball to all fields. He was hitting the ball pull side in the air. He was impacting the baseball. He's playing a really solid shortstop and second base when he played there. That if you saw him for the right stretch, you'd say, wow, this is the number one pick that we saw the Red Sox. There were other times where maybe the bat was lagging a little bit. He might have been a little bit tired. He was swinging, missing a little bit more. The defense wasn't there as consistently as maybe it could have been. But I think overall, we're really happy with the progress that he made over the time of the season, especially after starting out on the IL. And, to me, hearing Epi talk about what he brought in day out, the competitiveness, the willingness to challenge himself, the want to be in the lineup every day, and just the gamer that he showed in Double-A, which is a really hard level, that was really, really cool to see, because I don't know if we really saw that out of him. So we saw a kid that has matured and has grown and has really developed into an upper level prospect for us that maybe at the start of this year, he might not have believed himself to be. I think there's probably uncertainty on his end too. So a ton of credit to Mikey and our staff for continuing to work with him, and for him to continue to push himself and be the player that he knows he can be. And again, there's certainly still some areas that he needs to improve upon, like all of our guys, but overall, very pleased with him finishing the season healthy and a positive note in a level at Double-A that I think represents usually to me, like if you get to Double-A, that that is the determining factor whether or not you're going to be your suspect or prospect in a lot of ways. Once you get to Double A, you can either be there for 3 or 4 years, or you make that jump soon after. And we're really happy with the progress that he's made on both sides of the ball.
Would be remiss, Brian, if we didn't ask you before we let you go, if there are any particular players that come to mind, maybe a little bit differently than how I might have been thinking of asking this earlier, but who heading into 2025, you find yourself particularly excited about what they might do, or guys who maybe don't get that sort of, big 4 or 5 or whatever you want to call it, shine. When I look back at this year, one of the things that does stand out is that the guys that broke out were by and large guys who we kind of heard about in camp, within and without the organization, on, wow, this guy actually, keep an eye on him, more than just Christian Campbell. Jhostynxon Garcia was a guy who came up constantly in conversations during camp, and look at what he did. Is there anyone kind of coming out of this past year, maybe a little bit from what you've seen in the fall workouts or reports you're getting? Anyone come to mind that you think maybe doesn't quite get the shine, who should be on the radar a little bit more than they are?
I mentioned Jhostynxon Garcia. I think he's gotten a little bit more publicity or shine than maybe he did at the start of the year, for sure. He probably would have been one of them. I'll say, he's been with us for a couple years now. I just don't think he gets the love that he deserves because he's not flashy. He doesn't necessarily look the part or look like Marcelo or Roman, but Chase Mydroth.
Had a feeling.
He's just that guy to me who could have a 10+ big league career, multiple All-Stars, and is hoisted up the World Series trophy multiple times because of the player he is. He plays all over the field. He puts the bat in the ball. He's incredible at bats. Not surprisingly, impacting the baseball is just an area that he has to focus on. Bat speed. I hate to go back to that. Mm-hmm. I feel like everyone's like, oh, that's all the Red Sox care about. But he's a really good example of, for us, some of the things that we value. He does a lot of things that we value well above averages relative to a big leaguer. Impacting the baseball is one that he does not do as well as most big leaguers. So bat speed is an important factor in allowing him to get there. So he is very aware of that. He's training in the off season. He's been in Fort Myers for a little bit. He's at home in San Diego as well. But that is something that is a focus of his this off season. It was last off season. But I don't think he necessarily gets the love. You kind of have to see him play. Everyone I talk to on opposing teams or our current staff is always like, man, that kid is incredible. And I think if you really dig into the numbers show it as well. It's just not, the 30 home runs. It's not the multiple RBI games. It's, 2 for 2 with 4 walks, and 3 challenges won. Although,
yeah, he's not as good. Devastated when I found that out.
You guys, I was surprised. I was surprised as well. Every time I'm there, he wins them. So
same. That's why I asked, and someone told me that it wasn't as good as they thought because they looked. I think they said it was closer to 50%, which was just it ruined basically everything.
It's devastating.
I know it's everything that I thought was real. It's not.
It's like finding out Santa Claus isn't. Nope, we're not
going
to. There might be kids listening, so earmuffs.
Yeah. I make my kids listen to my podcast, so let's
That's why. Hey, I didn't.
Do we need to edit that out?
No. I would say on the pitching side, Hunter Dobbins, I think, is one.
I would have gone 2 for 2. Love it. I don't know why I thought that one, but
he's really progressed with his work, with the maturity. I think he and Justin connected really well. I think Justin is a forceful hand in a really good way, where he doesn't take much crap from our players, and again, in a really good way. It's like, hey, this is what do you want to be a big leaguer or not? Do you want to be a big league starter or not? If you do, this is what you need to do. If you don't, then you can go sit in the corner and do whatever you want to do, and we'll talk to you when you don't make it. Obviously, that is not exactly how it goes, but I think again, just being very honest and real with what our expectations are for these players. And I think Hunter, over the season, progressed, and there were certain times I think throughout the year where he was maybe wondering why he wasn't being promoted immediately to AAA, despite some really strong performance numbers. It's because, going back to earlier, the process wasn't there. And I think as the season progressed and as we got to that process becoming a little bit more clear and a little more consistent, and then the numbers remained and actually improved, that's when he got the opportunity to get promoted. And that's when we saw him continue to make those strides. So certainly tough decisions this offseason with the 40-man and roster type decisions. But I'd say like he definitely has put his name in the conversation, has put his name on the map as someone that, we're going to have to definitely discuss, and someone who's really valuable for this organization. And quite honestly, I think he'd be a starter. And that to me is what is obviously really difficult when you get to those AA, AAA levels. It's like, this guy's doing pretty well in AAA, but is he actually a starter? I think Hunter has shown with the pitch mix, with some of the adjustments he's made to that pitch mix, and the shapes that he has to his pitches, that he can be someone who gets guys out at the upper levels.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because it's something I talked getting feedback from external sources. They said the same thing. It's like people who saw him beginning of the season, and then same guy circle back later in the season. It's like, I think he can actually start now. And so, yeah, it's nice, or it's interesting to hear the kind of the process behind that, with how it played out.
Go for it.
Yeah, I have a very important question.
A couple of very important closing questions.
How tall is Jhostynxon Gonzalez? Because that picture of him at the awards thing was absurd. Like, he looked like he was like 6'6", 6'7". So
all I know is that I was told by my wife not to stand on that line anymore, because I was next to Paul Taboni and Jhostynxon Gonzalez and Christian Campbell. It was a bad look for me. That's for sure. He's tall. He's tall.
I'm looking at the photo right now, and he's standing next to Hunter Dobbins, who's listed at 6'2". And there's a good
Campbell on the other side, who's 6'3", right?
He's
4 to 5 inches.
He's probably
there.
6'5", 6'6". He's a big boy. Yeah, he's big.
A large mammal, as some might say.
Yeah.
All right. That was.
All right.
I just needed that confirming that my eyes weren't deceiving me there.
All right. And we have one last very important question before we let you go. We've now taken away the last of your sunlight today, and I feel bad because you're sitting there in the dark.
Okay.
Obviously we put in a lot of research and prep before we do any kind of interview. And of course I was checking out your Wikipedia page, which you have, which is crazy.
I know. Don't remind anyone that knows me about that, please.
Well, I guess I don't think I need to, because
Someone definitely does.
Someone definitely does, because I need to ask about the following sentence. In the summer of 2024, Abraham was kinged champion of the Framingham Little League Coaches Home Run Derby. Do tell, Brian.
That is true. Framingham has a baseball day, and they have a coaches home run derby.
Okay.
And I did win.
Okay. All right. Congratulations.
Yeah,
you should be proud.
Of myself. Yeah, we moved out of Framingham, so it was my going away gift. I do have a trophy that is on my desk at home. But I like to brag about it a little bit to the players, and I know Roman won the skills competition in Arlington, but Framingham Home Run Derby for coaches, I think a little bit more higher stakes. So,
of course.
Well, Roman won just because he could hit a bunch of home runs in the last round. That's not nearly as impressive as your totality victory.
Very tough competition, I'll tell you. A lot of ex-baseball player dads, or at least they thought they were good until I stepped up to the plate. So my son was very proud of me.
I'm sure he was.
I was about to say that's probably a huge win in his eyes.
It's the baseball version of my dad can beat up your dad. My dad can take your dad in a home run derby.
Yeah.
See his trophy. Excellent. All right. Well, thanks for being a good sport about that, Brian. I would not ask that kind of question of everyone. I need to take it in stride. All right. Well, we'll let you go. Thank you, as always, for your time. You are far too generous with it, and should probably tell us to go pound sand sooner. But we appreciate you coming on. We'll, of course, be in touch, and we'll talk to you soon. But thanks for joining us, Brian.
Yeah, thanks so much for you guys having me. I know I've said this before to each of you in person, but sincerely appreciate what you guys do for the Red Sox, for the farm system. I think it's an area that is really exciting, and it's a really cool way for fans to interact with our players. And I know something that myself and other people in PD and just the Red Sox organization appreciate the care and the time you put into this. So keep up the good work, and always appreciate talking to you guys.
Of course. Back at you, man. Thanks so much.